When I was a kid, I always believed, and as an adult, I still wanted to believe that somehow science was immune to the hate and to the greed and to the corruption that happened in so many other facets of life. And unfortunately, and this really came to light during the climate crisis that we're being told we have right now, and during COVID, that science has been corrupted as well. Science has been hijacked by by political interest. It's been hijacked by the church. It's been hijacked by, certainly by politics. It has been hijacked by industry, hijacked by technology. And so along with trying to set the ship, the course of our ship right with everything else, we're also trying to do the same thing with science as well. And a lot of people have lost trust in science because it has been hijacked, data has been cherry picked, and scientists have been corrupted. They've been bought off, they've been paid off by the industries that fund their research, which is very sad. I didn't want to acknowledge that. I had to, because that's what the data shows. The evidence supports that. So when we talk about science now, even science is taking on a new role in our lives today. For me, the bottom line, Adam, we ask science to tell us who we are. And science is doing a really good job of doing that. Science, pure science, is giving us the answers. The question is, are we willing to accept the answers that science is offering? And that is being answered differently by different scientists. The climate debate is a huge part of this. When you look at the scientists that are supporting the mainstream narrative and look at where their funding comes from, there's a conflict of interest that never used to exist in these kinds of debates, but that conflict of interest is there now. Very few scientists are out there who are not beholden either through university research or through private industry or lobbyists that are not being paid to say what it is that they're saying about the climate. And we are the ones that are suffering because our lives, our lifestyles, our children's futures are all being compromised based on that corruption. And this is a time when it's all coming to light. It has to. So the science plays a powerful role, and we have to. Science is meant to be constantly updated. It is not a static body of information. Science is a living body of information, and it's meant to be constantly updated as new information comes to light. When politicians and former presidents have come out and said that the debate is over, all the information is in, there is no more debate, that was a heads up that this was going to be a political fight and not a science fight, because true science is always being updated as new information comes to light. That's how you keep science honest. If we want science honest, we have to honor the new evidence that comes to light, whether it's evolution, whether it's our origins, whether it's climate, whether it's where viruses originate, whatever it is. And that's hard for some people because we live in a world where we've been taught that the world is static. We've been taught that climate should always be the way it's always been in our lifetimes. And if it changes, that something is broken. And we've been taught that, financial systems should always be the way that they've always been. These are static models in a dynamic world. And this is where the rub is. And we're living this. This is our lifetime. It's happening right this minute. So this is why I think information like this course is valuable, because it gives us insights into perspectives that are not common, they're not shared in the mainstream, but they are the perspectives, I think, that are healthy, based on what we know to be true at the time the course was made. And a year from now, new information comes to light. There are modules that might change because of that. They would have to be honest. But as of the time that this course is put together, this was the best information based on peer-reviewed science And that's why I covered so much ground. We covered we covered a lot of ground in this course on a lot of different topics.
There's a couple of companion questions to this. One is, can you say more about what is behind your belief that climate change is not real? We also have a number of questions about how do we adjust to climate change. So
Sure.
there's a
Oh,
lot of
I'm happy. First of all, I'm a geologist, and okay, here I am right now, geologist. I love to talk about this, and rarely do I have the opportunity. Climate change is totally real, and I want to be very clear about that. If anybody says I'm denying climate change, they have misunderstood whatever it is that I'm saying. That's the whole point, that the climate is constantly changing. And as a scientist, I was in the industry back in the 70s, and we were talking about this, as well as the magnetic fields of the earth are constantly changing. The problem, Adam, is that we as humans have built our lives based upon a snapshot of climate in a moment in time, expecting that the climate would always be as it was when we built our society, when we built our cities, and when we did all the things we did. We did not take into account that the climate is dynamic because we weren't being told that. We weren't being told that at all. So when you look at what's happening with climate right now, the only thing it threatens is the way that people have chosen to live based upon that snapshot in time. People built homes and condos, 2 feet from the ocean, thinking that the ocean is always going to be where the ocean is. As a geologist, when I was working in the industry, it's interesting. Wherever you find a river, for example, there are on either side of the river. Historically, geology will show us that the river has left its banks in the past and created what's called a floodplain. And there have been in the past policies that said you cannot build your home on a floodplain. You can build a business because a business can be replaced, but you cannot build your family's home because your family's home and your lives can be lost in rare events where that river is going to run over its boundaries. That same principle should apply on a larger scale with ocean plains instead of floodplains. And it hasn't. And even now, I live in northern New Mexico. I'm looking at new housing being built on the floodplains of rivers. Just because they haven't been out of their banks in the last 10 years doesn't mean they're not going to. But somebody has paid off and found a way around those policies, and they're now building where it was never allowed in the past. Somebody down the road is going to suffer from that. So what climate change is doing, what we call climate change, climate is dynamic. And I don't know how far back, we even want to go with this. When we look at the geologic records, the ice cores from Greenland and Antarctica are some of the primary records. We can see the ebb and the flow of Earth's temperatures over 420,000 years before present. This is interesting because humans only emerged 200,000 years ago. So what it says to us is that Earth was warming and cooling just the way it is now, long before humans ever appeared on Earth. That tells us beyond a shadow of a doubt that humans are not the cause. And I just listened to a news broadcast in the airports as I was coming back from the Middle East, where they are still saying humans are the cause of climate change. And our young people are believing this. And based upon that lie, they are feeling justified to violate and damage any property that they see that they believe now is contributing to the what they're being told is making Earth an unsafe place to live. So it is shredding our society and our young people because they're not being, what they're saying is not being, it's not honest. So we did not cause it. What we know is that carbon dioxide, this is the other thing, carbon dioxide is being demonized. We're being told it's a poison. We're being, all carbon, we're being told is something that we need to get rid of. which is a death sentence for Earth. And we know this because when carbon dioxide levels have dropped below critical thresholds in the past, Earth dies. Forests die, large animals, dinosaurs, large mammals, saber-toothed tigers, things like that have died out when the carbon drops. That number, the critical threshold, is right around 184 parts per million. When Earth has been above that, it has been the greenest and the lushest that it's been, which is where we are right now. Earth is greener now than it was 100 years ago. So the CO2, the warming, it's a problem because it is a problem for the lifestyles that we have chosen as a civilization on Earth. Does that make sense if I say it that way? And rather than compensating and adjusting for the climate change that's cyclic, that history tells us we can expect, rather than doing that, the arrogance of the policies that are out there now are telling us that somehow we're going to stop this natural rhythm. Now, do we need to stop burning fossil fuels? Absolutely. And I've been very clear on this. We need to stop burning fossil fuels because oil is a precious resource that cannot be replaced when it's gone. And without that oil, we can't do what we're doing right now. We can't have this conversation. We wouldn't have the computers we have. We won't have the electronics. We won't have the medical technology. So we need to stop burning it. And this is where these issues, they're all connected, because this ties into another module. We've had the technology to stop burning oil and to provide clean, sustainable forms of energy for over 70 years. But economically, it hasn't made sense to the powers that be. So we're not using the forms of energy. And, I talked about some of them in this course. So when we say that climate change isn't happening, climate is a dynamic system. It will always change. We came out of an ice age right around 12,000 years ago, and we are in a warming period. It's called the interglacial period. It's between the glaciers. We should be in a warming cycle now, and we are. And if we were not, I would be concerned. If we weren't in the warming cycle, I would look at the rhythm on those charts, and I would say, what's wrong? Why aren't we in the warming cycle? We are not the warmest that Earth has ever been. We're nowhere near the warmest that Earth has ever been. Earth has been warmer in the past, and it's had more CO2 in the past, but we didn't have high-rise condos built on the shore in the past. We didn't have entire nations built on land that is below sea level in the past. And one of the examples I gave, if we were really serious about this stuff, the powers that be, they would adopt the energy sources that stop kicking CO2 into the atmosphere. We are adding to the CO2. There's no doubt. There's no doubt that we are. You have to say that because our industry creates carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide is in the atmosphere. If they were serious about eliminating that, they would have gone with the energy sources that don't produce that CO2 that we've had for 70 years, and they haven't done that. So, we have to look at that. We have to look at that really, really carefully. But the demonization of the carbon is concerning because we are carbon as well. We are carbon-based life. And the transhuman movement that is trying to replace our carbon-based life with synthetic polymers and with synthetic materials that take away the DNA, that take away. If you've got synthetic skin based on a polymer, there's no DNA in that any longer. And the same with, the synthetic organs or, the chemicals are putting into the blood. All this ties together. We're demonizing carbon. We're demonizing ourselves. We are carbon-based beings. So I think you have to have common sense in all of the things that we're talking about here. And what happens is we tend to live in a world where things are pushed to extremes. And I think we're seeing those extremes play out right now. There's a whole conversation about why. What are the agendas underlying this and the competing agendas different ideas, different visions of what the world should look like. It's probably beyond the scope of what we can do in this mentoring session, but I think it's a conversation worth having. So the bottom line is climate is changing, and that's the whole point. We knew it was coming. And what we could have done, Adam, for example, you look at what's happening in the Northeast right now, the United States, big storm, people without power, people died. They're still probably finding people that have died. Climate change brings, the kinds of storms that we're seeing, but they're not new in the New England states. We see these big ice storms come in that weigh on the power lines to the point where they snap and they break, and the power poles collapse, and people go for days or weeks sometimes without power, no heat, no way to fix food, no way to care for themselves. A conscious society who is honest and truthful and factual about where we are in climate would compensate for that, for example, just one example, by burying the power grid. So putting all of those vital power lines under the ground so that the ice storms aren't going to break them. And I mean, you think about all the jobs that would be created from doing that. It'd be a massive undertaking, jobs that are needed right now. Think about the trees that we would save, because every year they're cutting down trees to rebuild those power lines, or the telephone poles, the power poles that get snapped off. People would have heat. They would still have the tough weather, but the people would have heat in their homes, and they'd be able to weather it out in a way that's not possible right now. And that's just one example of it's called adaptive resilience. Adaptive resilience is where you look at the reality of the world you live in, and you act accordingly in a way that reflects that reality. That's different than traditional resilience. Traditional resilience is where you live the life you've always lived, and you say, I'm just going to live this way. Something comes along, and a black swan event, and knocks you, off balance. And the resilience is how quickly can you get back to where you were. Adaptive resilience is always taking into consideration, honestly, truthfully, and factually, the realities of life, so that you can build and think and live accordingly. We've got a whole course based on this. It's called Radical Resilience that I offer through my website. So there's a lot that we can say about this, but I want to be clear. I've never denied the climate change. The fact that it's happening is the whole point. And this is one of those places where science and politics have compromised our ability to respond in a healthy way to a natural change. And now there are scientists who are thinking they can stop the natural rhythms. And that is an arrogant perspective, because when you stop the natural rhythms, the ripple effect of that is just unimaginable. So it's one of those places where you've heard the term, a little knowledge is dangerous. And I think that's exactly, what we're seeing with some of the climate scientists. By the way, there was a document that was just signed by bona fide climate scientists in the United States. There aren't that many. Who are pushing back on the political narrative, saying enough is enough. We've got to stop the false narrative because we're causing human suffering, and we are not on board with. And these are bona fide climatologists. When you hear the statistics, something like 97% of scientists agree, blah blah blah. With climate narrative, you look at who those scientists are, and the vast majority of them are beholden to financial interests that compromise, and there's a conflict of interest in what they're saying, including the climate scientists at the UN, which is very, very unfortunate. So